into talking about personal protection. So we'll talk about clothing, shelters, and then just some additional equipment that we'll have. Like we've talked about, is our main threat is going to be the sun and heat, but don't think that the cold is not potentially a threat out here as well. You know, Mount Charleston, the Sheeps, and then if you go up further north, it'll get real cold in the wintertime. So know what you're getting into. If you're going out for some of those sort of activities, obviously check the weather, and then be prepared for it to get way worse than it does. Weather's only so good. So we'll talk hot first, and then we'll go to cold. So heat, things I'm thinking about is keeping the sun off of myself. So I know we want to like strip down layers when it gets hot, but if you're going to be out walking around in the desert for long periods of time, having those coverings over yourself is going to keep you cooler in the long run. So thinking about like thin layered tops, long pants that are nice and thin, that are breathable, but keep the sun off of you. It's going to keep water in your body, you'll sweat less, and that sweat will kind of sit there, and then as the breeze catches it and absorb it, it'll cool you down and kind of keep a cooler layer inside of you. Obviously, you know, sunscreen is going to be helpful as well. Pretty common sense stuff there. Some of the things you could potentially use, you know, balaclavas, gaiters, shamogs, things of that nature to keep the sun off yourself. You know, just throwing these in a pocket, something as simple as like a buff. You throw that in a pocket and you can pull that up over top of yourself to keep yourself nice and cool if you end up being in the sun longer than you think you are. Moving on to cold, staying dry, staying insulated is going to be key. So things like Gore-Tex as that outer layer, ponchos as well, can be nice and effective. The nice thing about ponchos is they're multi-use items. I can make this into you know, a shelter. I can cover my ruck with it. I can lay it out as a sitting pad, which is not stuff you can do with like a Gore-Tex jacket. As far as like extreme cold, we want to have 3 layers typically is what we preach. So an inner layer that's going to be near our body that we can change out if it gets sweat ridden, and then a second layer that is going to be that bulk of your warming, so our warming layer, that insulation, and then the last layer is going to be keeping the weather off. So if we're expecting it to be wet, we want some Gore-Tex. If it's just extra cold, maybe just another warming layer to throw on over top to really keep that heat in your body. As far as the materials go, that inner layer can be cotton. It will pull that moisture away from yourself. Outer layers, we're thinking like wool or synthetic fabrics to really keep that heat inside you. And if it does get wet, it will retain its insulatory value. If you're skiing and you're wearing down, just keep in mind that if that down gets wet, the insulation pretty much goes away. So something to be aware of if you're going to spend a lot of time outdoors. Do I have layers to rotate through if I start to get things wet? Always having a spare pair of socks, or take a spare pair of mittens, because they can go on your hands as mittens or they can go on your feet as socks. So multi-use item, what's cold, what do I need? Also be aware of the wind. Up north in like central Nevada, it can get super windy, and that wind combined with just a little bit of cold will suck any heat out of your body. So having like wind-breaking layers like Gore-Tex, any other waterproof material is going to cut that wind a lot better than like a puffy jacket might.